When you think generic main character superpowers, the last thought that will pop into your head is rubber. When watching most long-running series, the character's main power is generally undefined in some way or another. I feel like that way, it has the ability to transform into so many different things, and it has so many different paths that it could take in the future of the series. Defining a main character's power will, in turn, define the main character's limits. And if you expect the story to have undeniable twists and turns and an extended future, those limits could be broken, leaving you with some very OP done wrong power-ups. The longer the series goes, the more limits get broken, the less realistic integrity an individual character arc could have, and the more difficult it is to write a power-up done right. I could give you a million examples of characters that the creator of the story is like, alright, so this dude's power is just generic energy blast. The best way you could define Naruto's powers are colorless powers. You know, generic shadow clones, or Rasengan being a colorless orb. He's not defined by fire magic, because that would limit him into that one niche. Looking at stories like Dragon Ball, where Ki Blasts is the generic level of power-up, so that way when he becomes Super Saiyan and becomes 10 times stronger than he was before, well, now it's just 10 times stronger Ki Blasts. When you're writing a manga with incredible power-ups that's gonna span 1,000 chapters, you need some sort of realistic type power, but it's still generic enough that it'll make sense that it's becoming so strong. Luffy having the power of rubber has every sign that it will fail becoming a good power for a main character moving forward, but it doesn't. Today I wanted to do an overpowered done right, something that was requested a lot in my comments. I wanted to talk about Luffy's Gear 5. Starting off the story, Luffy has the power of rubber. That's his devil fruit, and as far as we understand, he becomes a rubber man. A rubber man is just a dude that his arms and stuff can stretch and shiz, alright? It's pretty cool, I mean, I guess, sorta. But then when you start meeting some of the devil fruits, even getting closer and closer to the halfway point of the series, you start to realize that, wow, this dude is really limited by this rubber thing. I mean, do you remember how terrifying it was the first time we were introduced to a Logia fruit? Bro, you see Smoker turning into smoke, and you're like, what the frickles? How is Luffy ever gonna beat this guy? He could just turn into smoke. Of course, later, other incredibly broken devil fruits are introduced, but it started getting to the point, until the Water 7 arc, that every single arc, the main villain had some crazy power, and somehow Luffy needed to find a gimmick to beat him. Yes, somehow using water and liquid or his own blood could make his strikes actually connect with Crocodile. Oh yes, okay, that he'll use that gimmick to overpower him. And then he'll go up against Enel, someone who could turn into lightning. Well, lightning doesn't affect rubber though, so I mean, and it's this gimmick style that he's been using to get through the first couple of major bosses in the One Piece series, but we all know that this is not something that'll last. No matter how much he trains, with the tools at our disposal, Luffy will never be able to beat someone like Aokiji. This man could freeze tidal waves, okay? He could turn into ice. He bikes across the oceans. Like, how is this ever gonna happen? In the Enies Lobby arc, he eventually unlocks Gear 2nd and Gear 3rd, which I still remember at the time this happened, a lot of the fan base was really torn about it. Even though in retrospect, everyone loves Gear 2 and Gear 3. Gear 2, he becomes much stronger and faster, and he's turning pinkish, and Gear 3 he can blow up his hand like a massive balloon and start whamming people with a force 1,000 times as strong as his regular punch, because his hand is 1,000 times that big. And to everyone that's sitting there logically looking at this series, One Piece, trying to calculate, it's like, wait a second, this doesn't make any sense. His power is rubber. How did he blow up his hand? Does he have like a hole in his finger or something? But then his hand would just deflate. How could he just... I remember the fan base really scratching their head about this entire thing as the story was progressing. It's like, okay, obviously Luffy needs to get stronger because he's going up against all these guys. Just being able to stretch is not going to be able to cut it. But at the same time, this is ridiculous. I understand Oda has a great sense of humor, and One Piece is a comedy series, and a lot of this is very funny, but it needs to be somewhat realistic. It's all realistic now. Luffy's fruit was revealed finally not to be the Gum fruit. He's not a rubber man after all. This is the sun god Nika fruit. This was introduced and a lot of people were very upset about it. People were like, bro, we just retconned Luffy's entire arsenal. First of all, I think logically speaking at this point, it almost makes sense, okay? And a lot of more people were upset because, wait a second, he has this crazy overpowered broken fruit thing. So if it's so crazy, overpowered, and broken, it retcons the other part, which is just Luffy's not actually, you know, training himself to become stronger and, you know, building himself up from ground zero. He just happened to have the strongest OP fruit. Complaints were hitting at poor Luffy from both sides, and Luffy just laughed. This man did not care, and neither do I. Because I think this power-up is actually kind of awesome. I admit I was on the fence for this one as well. I love the fact that Luffy had a fruit that was seemingly innocuous in the grand scheme of things, but because of his training, his haki, his evolving, he was able to not only make something of this power, but become someone incredibly awesome. I love that, and I too was a little peeved when it turns out that fruit was just kind of broken all along. It's like the strongest fruit. It was this fruit that was guarded by the Marines. It was this fruit that Shanks stole. Turns out Luffy ate the awesomest fruit ever. I understand people being frustrated with it, but I also understand how well it actually fits with the overarching themes of the series. One important thing that I want to mention that was also dropped in the Wano arc, I almost think to counterbalance this entire argument, is the fact that Gol D. Roger, the strongest pirate of all time, the Pirate King, an absolute legend that changed the entire era and way of the world, had no fruit. At the end of the day, haki is what matters most. It's your level of training and self-control and all that jazz that will make you the strongest guy out there. So I like that they included this little tidbit, in fact, just kind of to say, listen, Luffy would have been awesome with any fruit. He just happens to have this one. And I love how overpowered and broken it is because it is an awakened fruit, and we've seen awakened fruits in the past. We see how crazy it is when these devil fruits get awakened and they get to unlock these crazy powers that are at the limit of our imaginations. Luffy definitely did need to work incredibly hard to get to this point. It's not like the entire world was given to him until here on a silver platter. However, it does fit so much better with the overarching themes of the entire story, and that is why I think this is overpowered done right. When going into this Nika mode, or Gear 5, Luffy starts laughing and cackling, and his fights look like a Tom and Jerry cartoon. Some would call it a gag fight. Some would say the fights aren't even able to be taken seriously anymore, but I would say that these are fights that were liberated from the shackles of reality, which is exactly the theme of Luffy throughout the entirety of One Piece, and it culminates so perfectly in this epic power that he has managed to acquire. When Oda was asked, back in the day, why rubber? That's not a normal power for a main character to have. You rubber? So Oda's answer was, well, rubber is the funniest power. That was Oda's answer. No matter what hardships come his way, no matter how he gets flattened out or bent out of shape, he'll just snap right back into position. Even though he is contained by the bounds of reality, he's able to stretch and twist and contort as long as he's still within these bounds of reality. What I really like about something like Gear 3rd, where he blows up his hand into like this massive balloon and he still can whack people like it's not just full of air, is because that is kind of on the boundary between being stuck in the shackles of reality and being liberated and freed from physics or reality. That being on the borderline is very telling as to where his fruit and power was eventually gonna get to, which is this final Nika form, which is actually freeing himself from reality. And it's just so perfect and ironically hilarious because looking at this retroactively, it kind of puts another spin on so many of the iconic fights that Luffy's had in the past. Just look back at the Enel fight, okay? I still think Enel versus Luffy was a fantastic fight. I love the Enel reaction image that everyone on the planet uses of where he zaps Luffy and it doesn't work. Because Luffy's rubber. But wait a second, Luffy's not rubber. Why was he unaffected by the lightning? Hold on a second, he's not really rubber, is he? But if you look at this fight thematically, it becomes so much funnier. You got Enel, okay? Yes, it's technically a lightning power, but this is a man disguised as a god. A man that imposes his divine judgment upon people, keeping people in their authoritarian jail cells, where even if they say one word out of line, he will strike them down. He is the complete opposite of freedom. He is a tyrant that will shackle you without impunity. So who is the complete perfect counter to that? Who is the ultimate counter to an unjust god out there to steal your free will? Well, the counter is happiness and freedom. How ironic that even though rubber is the perfect counter to lightning, freedom is the perfect counter to challenge Enel's authority. It's just so beautiful that it still is so characteristic of Luffy and fits so well into the themes of the actual series. But even more than that, it wasn't even that much of an ass pull. I mean, maybe a little bit, but free your minds from the shackles of that reality for a second, because that's what this show is all about. I always appreciate a power-up or something of that nature that actually fits so well with the overarching themes of the story and the character. Luffy's a man that wants to be the freest man on the sea. That was always his dream. And as we know, devil fruits are the manifestation of these dreams. It is so perfect that his devil fruit will be a god of liberation. So that's my piece up until this point. We needed a way for all of Luffy's fights to actually kind of fit throughout the series, and we needed the themes to remain completely attached throughout the series as well. We needed a character that we could follow and that we could love and respect throughout the entire story, where he could struggle at different points and that he can overcome and overpower at other points. Luffy is the man that's gonna become the Pirate King, and he's someone that's so good at being just unabashedly himself. That really is the truest freedom that anyone can experience. I just love that it's been mixing and mashing all of these cute cartoon ideas for the longest time. You know how in like all the old school cartoons, you got your Tom and Jerry, they'll eat a lot or whatever, and they'll become round and fat and stuff and just be like, oh yeah, I'm so full, because they have this massive stomach. And Luffy's been doing that the entire story. He's been playing into the cartoon tropes with his rubber fruit, but little did we know it was that freedom, the cartoon freedom that Luffy embodies, that is what he's carrying throughout the series. Only time will tell if this will take all the oomph out of every other fight for the entire story. Maybe every fight will be goofy now and One Piece will be garbage. I have faith in Oda that that won't be the case. Oda's an actual genius, and I will declare my banner for Luffy in the wars to come. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please leave a like, please subscribe. Please let me know future One Piece content you want to see, or future overpowered done right videos you want to see, or done wrong. That's been it for me this time, folks, so remember to stay weird, fam.